Welcome to Legends to Leaders. Today, we're honored to introduce Jeff Fenne. Jeff has spent his career in perioperative services and in leadership, culminating as a consultant and an interim for example, University of Illinois Healthcare, but frankly, all around the country. Today, Jeff gives us some lessons in addressing common deficiencies and corrective action plans. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Jeff, let's start here. For a newly promoted director stepping into a promotion, what are the most common deficiencies that he or she might face?
I would say going into an organization, especially if there's any struggling going on, staffing is frequently an issue that they might face. What I would say for a new director is to make sure they understand why there's staffing issues. Is it turnovers? Is it just inability to hire? Really partner with your HR partners to find that kind of thing. You're also going to find that morale is frequently not up to par or where it should be. And for a new leader, one of the best things you can do is be visible to improve that morale with your staff. Let them see you, know you're there for them. I can tell you in doing some of my interim work, nothing has been more widely receptive than just me keeping my door open to the office. I get so many comments about that type of thing. Frequently departments that are struggling had previous leaders that were maybe ineffective.
Yeah.
And typically you're going to hear a lot of that, but I guess my recommendation is don't pay attention to what everyone says happened in the past. Make your own place and move forward with it. Make sure your process issues are all in place. Know your regulations. You need to make sure you're following AORN, CMS, Joint Commission, DNV, whoever your accrediting agency might be.
Great. I want to come back to visibility, but just so that we understood your point about staffing. Now, the default that your mind goes to, it's OR nurse staffing, but I'm hearing a lot about surge tech staffing issues. And frankly, something that I think exists outside of the Director of Surgical Services domain many times, which is anesthesia staffing. What are you talking about when you're referring to staffing? And is there some differences, for example, between surge tech staffing issues and OR nurse?
I'm talking about all of what you mentioned. Both the OR nurses are, I don't want to say easier, but there are more nurses to recruit than there are surgical techs. Techs are a specialized program. They're just not readily available. Some organizations have started doing their own in-house tech programs, which works, but it's not quite as effective, I don't think, as going through a normal program. Anesthesia, not only the anesthesia providers, the nurse anesthetists, residents, whoever it may be. Another area that really struggles across the country. And like you mentioned, I've worked across the country doing these interim, and it's not been unique to one area. It's been everywhere.
Sure. Okay, so now you mentioned invisibility. You mentioned door open to the office. I've also heard wear scrubs even if you're not scrubbing in. Rounding is a way to be visible. Can you talk to me a little bit about other tips and tricks to increase your visibility and to make people kind of feel your presence?
Exactly what you mentioned. I probably put scrubs on 98% of the time. Not only is it more comfortable, you can be out there. You can, the best place to go and talk to a surgeon if you need them is at the scrub sink, because that's when they're going to be there. Rounding through all of the areas of the department. If you happen to not be over just the OR, make sure you're in the pre-op area. Make sure you're in PACU, connecting with all staff at all levels.
I had not heard that about specifically the scrub sink.
It is true.
That's a nugget of wisdom. I like that one. Okay, great. So when you identify a problem in the operating room, how do you think about, is this a personnel issue, a process issue, or a cultural issue?
I think you start by, if it's a one-off, that's a problem. It's probably a single personnel issue. If it's something that becomes widespread, it's either a cultural issue or it could be a process issue. So I guess those are two things you have to decide. You have to look at what the issue is, and then go back and see, is it because people aren't following policies, processes, or is it just, they just don't want to do it? So if the process is wrong, you need to break it down. If there's something in there that doesn't lead them to do things the safe way for the patient, then it's a process issue that you need to work on and revise that process.
Right, right. And then I heard you, in the vein of it's a cultural issue, say we're making a clean break from the past. And that strikes me, that's probably good. There's a new sheriff in town, or we have a new culture starting today kind of situation. How do you think about building a culture underneath yourself, or underneath kind of how you want the culture to start to shift in a certain direction?
I think part of it is you make sure that what you want done, you're doing, being the appropriate role model. I don't, some directors may have an OR background, some may not. I think you typically, to be honest, you are more readily accepted by the OR staff if you have worked in the OR in the past.
Right.
The other areas are a little less judgmental about that, but OR staff like someone who's been in the OR. Make sure you're in the ORs too. Don't just wear scrubs to wear scrubs. Go in and observe cases, talk to the staff as they're working, that type of thing.
Right, great. So, what are some early warning signs that small operational problems might be ready to grow? What makes you sort of get the hair on the back of your neck to stand up?
I think if it's something that you have addressed with one or more staff, you've re-educated staff, you've made sure that they know the policies, and it still continues, whether it's regularly or even intermittently, that's a larger problem waiting to happen or happening that you really need to address.
What do you do then? Are there documentation? Do you email yourself so that you have it in an inbox, or do you email it your one up? Do you email human resources? How are you thinking about starting to stop the growth?
You do some type of documentation, whether it's email, whether you're keeping logs, and each organization is different on where they want that information to go. If it's something that could result in some type of discipline, you definitely want to let your leader know that something is occurring. Some places want HR involved from the get-go. Typically that's the smaller places, or those that have a more centralized, large organizations with a centralized HR department. A lot of times they want to know, you sneezed wrong at a staff person, because they want everything to be kind of controlled on their plate.
Yeah, yeah. Let's imagine that Jeff has been dropped into a OR in which nothing is, well, there's multiple things that are going wrong at once. Remind us where you were, or maybe don't necessarily use names per se, but take us through kind of how you decided what you were going to tackle first. How do you prioritize if you've got multiple things that you're juggling?
You need to look at the first things you need to prioritize are anything that may affect patient care.
Yeah.
If there's anything that's a safety issue, those are the things you must, tackle right away. Those are things that cannot wait. You don't want to let anything go that has a potential for patient harm. Once you figure those things out, then you make sure that, you're looking at the practice, make sure your policies align with your practice. That's the one thing a surveyor is going to want to know. Even if they don't think you're doing something the way you should, if you're doing it according to your policy, it's a much easier action plan afterwards than, oh, we just didn't want to do it type thing.
Okay, all right. So, when corrective actions are necessary, how do you approach those conversations when trust is a rider, so to speak, so that you don't diminish trust at the same time as you address something directly?
Sure. You need to make sure that whatever you're addressing with the person is objective. Never put any subjective thought or comments into it. You're looking at the action, you're not looking at the person. I mean, it's important that staff understand that. You're not there for anything other than to make sure that you're doing, giving that safe care. So forget the person, look at the action.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the phrase, uh, "Love the sinner, hate the sin," right?
Yep,
In your words, look at the action, not the person. And that sounds like
correct.
it. Yeah, that sounds like it's very good advice.
And you need to
So,
make sure that you're treating all staff the same. Everyone has to get the same, if it's counseling that's needed, whatever it is, everyone has to be the same.
yeah, interesting. So if it is something, how do you let it slip, for example, that you treated someone in a certain way so that it would be established as precedent, or do you not because it's a behavioral issue and those types of things remain private? Tell me a little bit more about that bit.
I mean, the only thing you need to be, or the thing you can share with other staff is you are addressing issues. You never want to be specific of any type of conversation you're having, about anyone unless it happens to be that person.
Right? Maybe let it slip that you're being consistent, as opposed
Correct.
to let it slip that Jane or Joe has had a problem with and then name the problem. Yeah, that makes some sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, looking back on your career, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a newly promoted former nurse manager, now director of surgical services?
I think start slow, as I talked about. Observe for yourself. Don't listen to what other people are telling you issues are. Observe issues for yourself. And if you're promoted from a nurse manager direct to director and you are in the same organization, you need to really realize that your relationship with those staff are going to change. It's not the same thing if you're becoming a leader of someone who you used to be a colleague with.
I've heard that that's almost the most difficult thing. These people that you used to get coffee or, God forbid, cocktails with, and now you have to put them on corrective plans. What a
Absolutely.
challenging transition. Anything in particular that you remember about making those transitions that would help someone make those transitions?
I think it is just realizing, and sometimes you have to have the conversation with your friends, if that's what they were, letting them know that your relationship is going to change with them, that it has to change.
Be explicit about the relationship change. That's
Yep.
valuable. Jeff, thank you so much. So here's what we heard that I thought was most particularly impactful: the importance of visibility when you are first transitioning from nurse manager to director, whether it's wearing scrubs or the door open to your office. Rounding at the scrub sink was particularly specifically good for catching surgeons. Um, and that look at the action, not the person. And then start with a blank sheet of paper and draw a clear distinction from the past, including being explicit with your former colleagues about the need for you to be in a leadership role. Thank you very much. Any final comments
Exactly.
from you, Jeff?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm happy to share whatever knowledge I've gained over my years in the OR. So
Well, Jeff, thank you. Thank you for your insights addressing common deficiencies and corrective action plans. Thank you for your years of service to the perioperative community. You've been a great leader to the next generation. And until next time, this has been Legends to Leaders.